Okay, so basically, one of the most important things that we are going to discuss today is um, basically I would try my best to discuss all the things that are mentioned, how the artery and vein adapt to their function. First of all, first target is this. See, we said that artery has to bear the pressure. If we go back to the table, you'll clearly see here that we said that the function of the artery is tolerating the blood pressure and maintaining it. Now, how it would maintain it, how it would tolerate it, that is the bigger question. Suppose that this is the layer of this is the an artery. Hold on, let me draw it again. This is an artery, and the blood is coming from this side with full pressure. The blood is coming from this side, 120 over 80, and this blood pressure has to be maintained. This blood pressure has to be maintained throughout a particular distance away from the heart. Remember that the heart is pushing the blood towards the arteries. The heart is not responsible of maintaining the blood pressure once the blood is given to the arteries, which means that it is the actual duty of the arteries to maintain the blood pressure. Getting it?
Yeah.
It is duty of the arteries to maintain the blood pressure. So what happens now? The blood pressure would reach the artery, and due to a very strong push from the heart, it would strike at the wall of the artery. On both sides it would strike at the wall of the artery, making the artery swell like a balloon. The artery would suddenly swell like a balloon. Now you must remember that we said the arteries also possess the elastic tissue, and elastic
One
tissue
second.
means. Mhm,
This number 120 over, is that 80?
yeah, it is 80.
Okay.
So I would have explained why we set our criteria to 120 or 80 and what is the meaning of millimeter of mercury, but that would be a discussion of another time when we have some extra time. So elastic tissue is there. Now, what is elasticity basically?
That it can stretch,
Mm. And
that
any
it would go
one
back
more
to
feature.
its normal after
Yes,
stretching.
this capability is called as elasticity, that a material can be stretched, but it would go back to its original shape after getting de-shaped. So now what's going to happen that this particular swelling, this would recoil. Elasticity means the thing would recoil. It would go back, and now the blood that made the balloon or that made the artery swell, it would be getting the pressure back from the wall of the artery, and it would be like you can say that this pressure would be created by the artery. So remember that once the heart has pushed the blood, now it is the duty of the artery to keep the pressure constant by constantly recoiling against the pressure of the blood, against the pressure of the blood. Now the whole artery would appear like this. It would be swollen, then it would recoil, then it would swollen, then it would recoil. So every time it would recoil, it would be pushing the blood forward. Why not backward? Because the blood is already coming from the backside, so it would not be pushed towards the backside. So there is the way the artery would be maintaining the blood pressure. Got it?
Yeah.
Hmm. So now you can easily see over here that this blood pressure would be maintained, and you must also know that when the heart beats or when the heart contracts, this terminology is called as systole. In other pronunciation it is also called as systole, but the systole is the pronunciation in British. And when the heart relaxes, it is called as diastole. diastole. Now remember that this blood pressure that is being maintained by the arteries, it is happening in the absence of the systolic pressure. So this pressure is basically called as the diastolic pressure, because this pressure is being maintained by the arteries when the heart is relaxing. When the heart is relaxed, the arteries are maintaining the blood pressure. So that is why this pressure is called as diastolic. And the pressure that is being pumped by the heart, that the pressure that would be uh, I'm sorry, the amount of pressure that would appear on the machine when the heart is pumping, or the heart is in the systolic phase, that would be 120. So 120 over 80 basically means that the systole is 120 and the heart is pumping, and diastole is the blood pressure that is being maintained by the arteries. This pressure tells us that when the heart is relaxing, what is the blood pressure in in our arteries. Getting it?
Yeah. So it's like the blood pressure is
You need
120 when
mhm.
it contracts and 80
120
when it relaxes,
when the heart contracts. Exactly.
and and
When the heart
120 and
relaxes, it is
80 when
80.
it's relaxed. And what's the unit?
I'm sorry, your voice lagged.
What's the unit for
U-
the 120 and 80?
Unit is basically the millimeters of mercury. Have you ever seen a blood pressure device in
Yeah,
which there is an air pump?
yeah.
Air pump. We fill up a piece of cloth like thing from the air pump. So basically, it is the total pressure. The total pressure. Uh, the blood is basically uh, the blood is basic. What happened?
My call disconnected.
Oh, okay. So basically, millimeter of mercury means, and you may have seen the device in which we have a vertical side of the blood pressure measuring device, in which the mercury is moving up. With each pump, the mercury is moving up. Is that do you understand that?
Yeah.
So that mercury, the blood pressure, and the mercury are related. So the definition of millimeter of mercury is the amount of blood pressure that is being exerted over 1 millimeter of mercury is called as mmHg. It is the shortest way I could tell you mmHg, because it has a lot of detail. So basically, the amount of pressure your blood exerting over mercury is counted as millimeter of mercury. Got it? It is the simplest way to understand it. You may also know, if you want to, you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. If you also want to know that what other unit is there, so 120 millimeter of mercury is also 16 kilopascals. 16 kilopascals. There is the interchanging unit between them is around 0.13. 0.13. 120 divided by 0.13 would be 16 kilopascal, as far as, or maybe it is something like this, divided by or maybe multiplied by, hold on, no, yeah, it's 15.6. It's multiplied with 120 multiplied with 0.13 equals to 15.6 kilopascals. So this unit can be the blood pressure can be measured in kilopascals, and the blood pressure can also be measured in bar. But what is our main when it comes to the when it comes to that the medical? When it comes to the medical field, we always pressure measuring the blood pressure in millimeters of mercury. You want more
Okay.
explanation about it, or
No,
should
it's
be
fine.
moving on? Okay, so this is the work of the artery. Now, what are veins? I have already told you the veins are basically quite wider, and they are quite wider. They have wider lumen, and they are basically you can simply say that veins are storing the blood as well. Now, if you see a person, you know very well that each person has like if we assume that this is a leg, then we already know that in the legs the blood has to move opposite. What does it mean? The blood has to move against the gravity. It has to move upward. And we also know that there is no device, there is no pumping organ. The heart is there. The heart is there. The blood has been pumped by the heart, and it has now entered into the legs. But how the blood would return back to heart? This is the biggest question. Obviously, we don't have any pumping organ inside the leg. So what do we do now? Remember that in the legs we have veins. And these veins typically contain the valves, as we have discussed already in the previous lesson. It has the valves, and these valves are like this. These valves are like this, and uh, when the blood moves forward, when the blood moves forward, then these valves open and then close. They would open and then close, and they would not let the blood come back to the previous position, to the previous location. But the problem is, what is basically pumping the blood? What is basically pumping the blood to the to the upper location, to the position above? Those are basically the muscles. These muscles are present in your legs, and these leg muscles are, what are they going to do? They are going to, when you would run or walk, they would contract. When they would contract, they would push the vein. The blood would be almost jumping to the next part, and immediately when the muscle would relax, the valve would close and the blood is not going to come back. And this basic for this, the walk and running is necessary. For this purpose, the walk and running is necessary, because if the walk is not being done, then always remember that you are not going to push your blood to the next level. Getting it?
Yeah.
Hmm. So that is why these muscles are important. These muscles are typically very important because they push the blood. Look at this. Elephantiasis. These are lymph vessels. Oh no, sorry, these are lymph vessels. The lymphatic system is not uh, okay, so no problem. Anyways, so this is how the veins are going to hold the blood, and the blood would be returned back to heart by the constant pumping of these muscles, so that the blood would be jumping to the next level, and again you will push them. The blood would come back to the heart. This is one of the most important way to know that if we are not doing the proper exercises or walk, we'll be constantly pulling the blood in our legs, and day by day our walk and our running would become difficult because the blood is getting pulled. And because of this particular reason, standing is not the answer. Remember, standing is not the answer, because merely standing would lead to a dangerous situation called as varicose veins.
Yeah.
You may search about it on Google. Anyways,
I
next.
thought that was just a symptom of old age, not a problem necessarily.
It is a problem. It is a problem. It is a problem related to standing. constantly standing. It mostly happens in the females, but and it does happen with the advancing age. But this also happens to the people who are fatter, who have gained a lot of weight, and they are not moving properly. This happens to them. Got that?
Yeah.
Okay, next let's come to the capillaries. Now, if we go back to the slides, the function of the capillary, what did we discuss? We said exchange of substances. Exchange of substances between what and what? First of all, let's understand that when do we see the capillary forming? Remember, the capillary only forms when the blood needs to enter into the tissues. Once the blood has entered the tissues, the capillaries would only be formed by then. Otherwise, if the blood is outside the tissue, it would be considered as what I must say, like it would be considered present in the arterioles or arteries or venules or veins. If it is in the tissues, then it would be inside the capillary. Why? Because the purpose of the capillary is to exchange the substances between blood and tissues. Remember, except one, except one, none of our organs are pooled by the blood. Let's make it two, except two. None of our organs are pooled by the blood. There is no organ except two in which the blood comes out of the capillaries. And what are those two organs in which the blood comes out of the capillaries? One organ which gets pooled by the blood is spleen, and the other organ that gets pooled by the blood is the placenta. Otherwise, the blood always remains inside the capillaries, and if by any chance the blood comes out, that situation is called as hemorrhage. That
Yeah.
situation is called as hemorrhage. So,
It's a
two
hemorrhage,
things.
like brain hemorrhage.
Hemorrhage is any situation in which the blood is coming out of the capillaries. Any situation. Let me give you a small example of hemorrhage. If you get hit by a ball, if you get hit by a tennis ball or football, and you get a large bluish stain on your skin, have you ever? Have you ever got that?
Yeah.
Or maybe you hit a wall or maybe a side of the bed, and a blue stain
Bruise.
appears on your skin. Yes, bruise. That is hemorrhage.
Okay.
Anywhere, because it after some days, what happens? Do you see it after a few days?
It just goes away.
It disappears. Why? Because your recycling system basically would recycle the blood. It would just wipe it out. But the capillaries are ruptured from there. It basically means the capillaries are ruptured. So that is the hemorrhage. And if it comes to the brain, then that is a bad news. That is a bad news because brain would never, whole brain. Have you ever seen the brain from outside?
Yeah, but not like I've seen like a cow or sheep brain.
She brain. Yeah, okay, fine. What is the color of the brain? Is it pale?
It's pink. It's pink. Pale
Pink colored
pink.
brain. Pale pink. Always remember the brain is pale white, or maybe you may have seen some other situation. The problem is if the blood enters into the whole brain, not a single drop of blood enters into the brain. The blood just goes on the outer boundary of the brain and then comes back. It then comes back. Why? Because there is a particular terminology, let me tell you, blood brain barrier. It never lets the blood enter into the brain unless the capillary is ruptured, the artery or vein is ruptured, and boom, that's all. That would be either paralysis, coma, or death.
Okay.
Only two situations would lead to it. One is blood pressure, that could lead to stroke. And other situation is the thrombus, which means clot. Anyways, so the one a capillary, once we talk about a capillary, the capillaries are basically made of cells, and the most important part about the capillary is that the capillaries are always single cell thick, like they don't have any much of a distance. And outside a capillary, this is the lumen of the capillary, outside it you would have the tissue. These black cells are expressing the tissues. Now everything that would be exchanged by between the tissues and the blood would either be through these pores. These are called as capillary pores. And in medical, this is also called as fenestrations. And or maybe if something else is passing through it, it would be passed through the cells. And any kind of movement can occur here. The diffusion occurs here, the osmosis occurs here, and active transport could occur here. Active transport. You got the book in front of you right now?
Um, no, no, you're correct.
Uh, do you have it?
Mm,
Okay, please open it and take out page number 88. I guess it would be on the same page.
no, that's transport of ions.
It's on some other page.
Yeah, let me just look at the contents.
Okay. Please be quick.
What's the title of your page? Yeah, I
It's.
found it. That's been true.
Do you see this diagram?
Yeah, I found the page. Yeah, it's this diagram, right? Can you see it?
Yes. Page on your left.
Yeah.
Hmm. So see, this is basically the yellow background here. The yellow background here basically depicts the tissue, boundary of the tissue. The outer, and they are clearly referring to it, the tissue fluid. If you remember, I told you that every tissue must have the fluid. So what happens? This is artery. It is carrying many things, like it is carrying blood. It is carrying the oxygen, blood, oxygen, many other useful substances. The blood would be moving here. Once it would move forward, it would be dividing into the capillaries. Now remember that everything would be transferred according to the principle of diffusion osmosis. And what is that? According to concentration gradient, transferred according to
So low water potential to, sorry, high water potential to low water potential.
yes, higher water potential to lower water potential, and the things would be transported. Even the water from plasma, the water from plasma would also be transported from the capillaries into the tissues. What would be the benefit of it? Remember, I'm about to write a very important sentence. If you want to write it, you must write the water from plasma leaks into the tissue fluid, maintaining the composition of tissue fluid. It typically means that when the water, let me draw one line of cells here. When the water would be moving, its pressure would be sufficient enough to let the water pass through the tissue, pass through the pores into the tissues. Suppose that, like, if if the blood stays here, that would be dangerous because it would cause the clotting. If the blood passes very quickly through it, it means that a lot of water may be filtered through it, because the higher the pressure, the more would be the filtration. So we keep a very stable blood pressure, and the water, glucose, oxygen, amino acids, these things are transported from the blood into the tissues. So when the blood, this is very interesting. When water is in the blood, what do we call it? When the water is in the blood, can you tell me?
Um,
We call it plasma. When
okay.
the water has entered in the tissues, now it would be called as tissue fluid. It is the same water that was plasma when it was in the blood, but now it's been filtered into the tissue. It would be called as tissue fluid. And the water, obviously, if the water is moving, then the water would be moving according to the principle of water potential, and that is higher water potential to lower water
Low water
potential. Now this
retention.
is going to be very interesting. When the flow of blood is from left to right, over here the water potential is higher than the tissue, so the water would be moving inside. But by the end of the capillary, the water potential of blood becomes lower compared to the water potential of the tissue, which has now become higher. Why? Because a lot of water has been leaked into the tissues, so the water potential inside the tissue has become higher. Now some of the water would leak back to the blood because of the difference in the water potential. Got it?
Yeah.
What do you think the tissue would give to the blood? Something should be transported from the tissue to the blood. What do you think that should be?
Um, I think it's so. Does it like transport the oxygen?
Oxygen is transported from the blood into the tissues. Something should be transported from the tissues into the blood, since these arrows are depicting that thing. So, what do you think?
I'm not sure.
Wastes,
Waste.
especially urea. Urea would be transported because the urea is made inside the tissue.
Yeah.
So, it would be handed over to the blood. Secondly, a very huge thing, not in size, but in the demand. The CO2 has to return back to the blood because the brain and heart are very sensitive to the concentration of carbon dioxide. So the tissues would immediately leave it to the blood so that it can be breathed out. So this is how the exchange of substances occur. Understood?
Yeah.
Anything you want to repeat?
No.
A very interesting thing is mentioned here, formation of lymph. What is this? Formation of lymph is when uh, when the tissue fluid is there. You know very well that I said that some of the tissue fluid would be returned back to the blood, but not all tissue fluid, not all tissue fluid stays in the tissues, stays in the tissues. Once the once the tissue fluid is sent, oh sorry, is transferred to the blood, to the blood, the remaining tissue fluid, the remaining tissue fluid would be returned to the blood, to the blood by another transport system, and that is transport system. What is the other transport system?
Circulatory system. Lymphatic
No,
system.
the transport lymphatic system. So basically, if you closely look at the diagram, the tissue fluid is there, and a, a little amount of water is returned back to the blood. We said it in the very beginning that when the water potential difference is there, when the water potential difference is there, so it means that when the water potential difference is there, it means that the water could be transported from the tissue to the blood. But now, now the blood is, once the blood is in equal water potential, when the blood is in equal water potential with the tissue fluid, no more water would be provided back to the blood. This is not, you can say, this is not something. This should not happen. The tissue fluid has to be transported. The tissue fluid has to be transported back to the blood. We cannot transport all of the water with the help of the water potential. So what do? The remaining tissue fluid would be provided to these lymphatic vessels. With the help of osmosis and diffusion, the remaining tissue fluid would be transported to these lymphatic vessels, and this should be returned to blood. Returned to blood. Once it is returned to blood, it is it it is you can say it goes through a system called as lymphatic system, and lymphatic system is something that is lymphatic system is something that is uh, very important in filtering the lymph, filtering the tissue fluid. Why we need to filter it? Because it tells us a lot of things, like if there is any infection or something like that. So once the tissue fluid is made, a little amount is returned back to the blood in the capillaries, but the rest of the tissue fluid has to return to the blood. That would be returned with the help of the lymphatic system. The lymphatic vessels would be carrying the remaining tissue fluid and back to the blood. Any problem?
No.
Is it understood properly?
Yes.
Okay. So this is how the substances are exchanged. And this is some extra information, problems with the return of the tissue fluid. Basically, if there is a problem, like if your lymphatic system is not properly working, if it is not properly working, then remember that the lymphatic vessels, your 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 lymphatic system would become choked, your tissues would become choked, and your legs would appear like this. This is a very dangerous situation, and most of the time it is an indication of kidney failure. Not
Okay.
always, but it is most of the time an indication of kidney failure if a person's feet or legs are constantly swollen. Okay, moving to the next
So
chapter.
isn't it also
That
something to do with diabetes?
Yeah,
because nothing.
in diabetes it also happens. In diabetes it also happens, and this should be very much taken care of, because in the diabetes, the the diabetic people have to be walking very regularly. Have to walk very regularly because the glucose can store in the tissue fluid in your legs, and if you are not constantly moving the tissue fluid and your blood, then it would cause the swelling of the tissues. So it does happen, but remember that with this much higher diabetes, the kidney failure is also very much usual thing. All right, so we move to the next part, very interesting part, the heart. Now, about the heart, I'll tell you a bit on the Jamboard. The heart basically is a total muscular organ. It is totally a muscular organ, and it is divided into pockets, and those pockets are technically called as chambers. Remember that the chambers are the chambers are are there according to the need of the body. According to the need. What is the need of the body? Number one need, keeping the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood separated. First need is this, deoxygenated blood separated. Second, second is maintaining a differential pressure. Maintaining a differential pressure according to the size of the body. To the size of the body. Size of the body. There are many types of organisms who have only two-chambered heart. Two-chambered. You know which kind of organisms have possess two-chambered?
Um, I think I've heard. Is it fish?
Hmm. There are three-chambered heart that is found in the amphibians. And then there are four-chambered heart, no, amphibians and reptiles. And the four-chambered heart is found in mammals and birds. And the four-chambered heart, there is a particular purpose and two purposes that I have written over here. Okay, next. Next is uh, once we try to understand the heart, we do sectioning. Did I tell you about the sectioning before? I guess I have.
Yeah, you did.
So we divide the heart according to our convenience. We divide it vertically. When we divide it vertically, the heart is divided into two portions, right and left. Now, apparently, when we look at the screen, I totally mentioned the right and left wrong, isn't it? Because when you are looking at the screen, the right is your left and the left is your right.
Yeah,
Hmm. Basically, when you would divide the heart into right and left, you would do it according to your own perspective. Always remember, the screen is always mirror. If you see in the mirror, if you see in the mirror, you see a totally inverted image of yourself. When you lift your right hand, the person in the mirror would lift its left hand, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is exactly the way you should look at the heart. That right is according to your perspective, not the screen perspective. Got it?
Yeah.
So right, left, and then we divide it horizontally. And this is when we divide it horizontally, the upper regions, the upper part are called as atria or singular atrium, and the lower part is called as the ventricles. And the lower part are quite large, and this one is quite stronger as well. This one is quite stronger as well. So uh, this portion would be called as right atrium. This one would be called as left atrium. This is going to be called as left ventricle, and this is going to be sorry, right ventricle, right, and this one is going to be called as left ventricle. Okay, so the principle is to pump the blood, to pump the blood. And heart, always remember, uh, due to heart, due to heart, we call we call the movement of blood, we call the movement of blood circulation. Circulation. Why? Because heart is the common point. Is the common point. So it means you must remember that heart is in the middle. There is one type of circulation when the blood exits from the heart, goes to the lungs, and gets back. Is it circulation?
Yes.
Then the blood would go to the body and then back to the heart. It's again the circular motion. So we name these differently. We say that in one kind of pumping, the heart is sending the blood to get oxygenated. To get oxygenated. It means the blood that is coming from the heart towards the lung is what? It is deoxygenated. It would move through the lungs and it would again get oxygenated. And then the heart pumps the blood to the body. That blood is oxygenated, and when it returns from the body, it would again become deoxygenated. It would again become deoxygenated, and uh, these are two circular motions. Apparently, if you closely look at it, the heart is basically doing two circulations. Two circulations are done by the heart. Are done by the heart in complete single beat. Complete single beat. First, the heart is moving the blood towards the lungs and then get back. What do you think we should be calling this circulation? What scientific name would you prefer to use? When the blood is moving towards the lungs and then away from the lungs.
Blood.
When the blood is moving towards the lungs and away from the lungs, what would you call this kind of circulation?
Um, Pulmonary circulation.
Yes. This kind of circulation is pulmonary. Why? How did you guess that?
I think I've heard it before somewhere with the lungs.
Hmm, hmm. Then when the heart moves the blood towards the body and then the blood comes back to the heart, this circulation is, can you name it?
No, I don't know this one.
This is called as systemic. It means once the blood is moving towards the systems. So systemic circulation. So now let's have a look at it, how it happens. First of all, if you look at the figure, you may open your book as well. If you look at the figure, you can clearly see the blue and red side. This is one of the misconception that we keep in our mind for a very long time. And what is that? The deoxygenated blood. One thing, okay, I need to mention one thing, then I'll get to the misconception again. Always remember that the right side is dedicated for the deoxygenated blood, and the left side always possesses oxygenated blood. Now, it is a very big misconception that the blood would becomes blue when it has less oxygen, and the blood would the blood would become red when it is oxygenated. The problem is it is totally wrong. The blood gets dark red when it is deoxygenated, and it gets brighter red when it is oxygenated. Got it?
Yeah,
The problem is due to the structure of veins, we look at the blood, we consider the blood as blue, because most of the time the superficial vessels that we see in our arms, those are veins, not arteries. Those are veins. So those superficial appear blue because of only because of the color of the veins and not because of the blood. Okay, so first vessel that we often discuss about is the vena cava. This is the vena cava, and always remember this is not the only vena cava. There is another vena cava behind it. Let me make it. Let me make a supposed vena cava. This vena cava is, hold on. This one and this one, both are vena cava. This one is receiving the blood from the upper body. Upper body means brain, arms, shoulders, etc. And this one is receiving from the lower body. From the lower body. Okay. Now, once the blood enters into the heart, the first chamber that the blood would face is the right atrium. The right atrium would pump, pushing the blood into the right ventricle. Now, the right ventricle has more muscles, larger one, so it would push the blood harder than right ventricle, right atrium. Sorry, it would push the blood harder than right atrium, and the blood would be moved out. This vessel, this vessel is called as pulmonary artery. Where is it going?
to the heart. I mean, to the
Huh?
lungs.
Yes. And this is the only artery that contains the deoxygenated blood. So the blood goes to the lungs, then gets back from, suppose that these are the lungs. Now the blood gets back from the lungs. All right, now it has become oxygenated. It would enter into the left atrium, which would now pump the blood into the left ventricle. Left ventricle has the thickest, left ventricle has the thickest wall in the heart. And why is that? Because it has to push the blood with a lot of pressure, push the blood with a lot of pressure lot of pressure uh, to sufficiently to sufficiently move it to the whole body. That is why it has a thickest outer wall. And when the left ventricle pumps, it would move the blood into the aorta. This vessel is called as aorta, and aorta is a very unique vessel. You have to be very careful while listening to it. It is very unique vessel in the sense that it turns into three or four bifurcations. It makes an arc which would be taking the blood first. This blood is going to the upper body. This blood is going to the upper body, and it would make an arc, bends downward, taking the blood to the lower body. It would come out from here. Then this blood is going towards the lower body. So now if you notice here, the blood enters and exits from the heart twice. Can you tell me how it is entering and exiting twice?
Um,
First, tell me about the entry.
so enters the right atrium and
First entry is in the right atrium. Second one,
the left atrium.
yes. No, no, no. Sorry, sorry, sorry. Not the left atrium. That would not be. I'm talking about the entry. Okay, sorry. Right atrium entering and left atrium entering. Okay, I
Yeah.
thought I was asking about exit. Okay, exit. What is the first exit?
Uh, so it goes through the aorta.
Yes. Although I described it left ventricle to the body through aorta.
Left and right
I
ventricle.
described. And what is the second exit?
So right ventricle.
Right ventricle to lungs through pulmonary artery.
Circulation. Okay. Pulmonary.
That is how the blood is moving. So this is why our heart is also called as double circuit heart. Double circuit heart. Okay. So another very, very important thing you can see over here is the presence of the valves inside the heart, cardiac or heart valves. There are two valves. One type of valves are called as atrioventricular valves. Atrioventricular. What do you think? What do you suppose by this name? What kind of valves are these?
They're inside the ventricles.
They are situated between atria and ventricles. And ventricles. Look at this. One is this one, and the second one is this. They are situated between atria and ventricles. One is called as tricuspid. Tricuspid means that it basically has three doors. Blood goes through it. Tricuspid. And the tricuspid is present between a right atrium and a right ventricle. What is the purpose of the valves?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
What is the purpose of the valves?
Um, Preventing the backward flow.
Preventing the backflow. Why the blood would flow backwards? And where would it go when it would flow backward?
Um, I'm not sure where it would go after.
When the ventricle would pump, which one would be pumping? Which one would be pumping um, strongly? Which one would be pumping strongly, atria or ventricles? Hmm?
The atria.
Atria. Ventricles. Ventricles are pumping strongly. They have strong walls. I told you that the right atrium pushes the blood harder than right ventricles. I'm sorry, right atrium. This right ventricle would be pushing the blood harder than right atrium, and the left ventricle would be pushing the blood harder than any other chamber. So ventricles always have the greater push.
Okay.
So when the ventricles would push strongly, there is a high chance that the blood would move back to the atria. Is it understandable?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah.
So when the ventricles would pump and there is a high chance that the blood would get back to the atria on both sides, now what do? We would keep the valves closed. The atrioventricular valves, you can say the AV valves, close when ventricles are pumping. When ventricles are pumping, so that the blood must not go back to the atria. Is it understood now?
Yeah.
Second type of atrioventricular valve is the bicuspid. Bicuspid. Bicuspid mean which has only two doors. This is one, this is second. Only two doors are here. And it is between left atrium and left ventricle. Between left atrium and left ventricle. So blood would be may not be pushed back into the atria. Did you get it?
Yes.
If there's any confusion, I can repeat it, no problem.
No, there's no confusion.
So the ventricle, the valves basically prevent the backflow. The second type of valves that you would find in the heart are semilunar. Semilunar. The semilunar valves are present between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, and the left ventricle and aorta. The purpose is same. Look at this. Look here. you see this wall. When the ventricle would pump, the blood would move forward, but there is a high chance some of the blood would get back to the ventricle, and we cannot do this. So that is why this valve would immediately be closed. This valve would immediately be closed. This is one semilunar. This is the second semilunar. The blood would be pumped, move into the aorta with very high pressure, but due to striking to the walls of aorta, it can come back. But now the semilunar valve would close. The blood would never get into the ventricle again. That is why we need to uh, we need to make the valve here so that the blood does not flow backwards. That would be extremely dangerous. Clear?
Yeah.
There is a very typical question that why heart has four chambers. Okay, first thing here, another thing, not first thing. You see this wall and this wall, this one and this one. This particular wall is named as septum. I would tell you its correct name. The name is interatrial septum. Present between I'm really sorry. Interventricular. Interventricular septum. This wall is separating the blood between ventricles. Otherwise, the blood would be mixed. So this septum is important. Another septum that you would look here, let me remove it all. Another septum that you would find over here, this one. This one is called as interatrial, means a wall between two atria, although it is a bit behind it, but there is a wall, and that would be separating the blood between the right and left. Why? The purpose is the interatrial septum and intraventricular septums separate the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. First purpose is to keep them separated. Did you understand the walls? The septa?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you just say no?
No, I said yes.
Okay. Then the other purpose to make the heart into four chambers is to make the pressure difference, huge pressure difference possible. Why? How? See, when you talk about the right ventricle, it has thin walls, thin muscular wall, only had to transfer, only have to transfer blood to lungs. So this pressure would be lesser. The blood would go to the lungs, get to the left atrium. About the left ventricle, it has to create a lot of pressure. It has thick wall, thick muscular wall, and it has to create a lot of pressure because it has to push the blood towards the whole body. So the left ventricle would be pushing the blood like this and downward. So that is why it has the thickest wall. If the lower chamber was one, then it would be very dangerous. Let me tell you how. So the problem is if the pressure is lower. Okay, hold on. The pressure of pulmonary circulation is almost 60 millimeter of mercury. 60-20, almost 60-20. But what is the pressure of systemic circulation?
Was it 120?
Yeah, the pressure for systemic circulation is 120 over 80. It is 60 over 20 almost. Now, suppose that if we uh, provide this pressure to pulmonary circulation, the capillaries would rupture, and it does happen. It happens to the people who are basically having a lot of high pressure in their pulmonary circulation. Their lungs become filled with water. And if we provide the 60 over 20 to systemic circulation, it would not even close to enough. It would not even close enough. So that is why we need to make the walls and the chambers in like we need to make 4, and we need to keep the difference between them. Is it clear?
Yeah.
You don't need to know about the pacemaker. Okay. When is your next class?
Um, like the next class, you mean after this?
15 minutes after this?
No, I don't have a class after this.
Okay, okay. Just give me a bit more time. Now, once the heart has pumped the blood, and we know that different chambers have different pressures, the the pressure difference between right atrium and left atrium is not that much. So these almost have identical muscular composition, etc. But between the ventricles, there is a lot of difference. Why? Their purpose is different. Their purpose is different. So I hope these things are understood. There comes another topic called as heart or cardiac cycle. See, what is the function of the heart? The function of the heart is to contract and relax. So for the contraction of the heart, we use the word systole, and for the relaxation of the heart, we use the word diastole. I have mentioned this already. Remember that, okay, first of all, you know that the atria should contract, moving the blood to the ventricles. To the ventricles. Right?
Yeah.
What should be the next phase? Which one? What should contract now? What should contract now? The ventricles should contract now, or the atria should relax now as the second step?
So it should relax now, the atria.
The atria should relax first. Why would you think that? that atria should relax first before ventricular contraction?
Um,
The atrial relax would provide enough time for the valves to close. And what would be the benefit of it? What would be the benefit of it?
if the
Giving enough
valve
time.
if the
Hmm.
valves close,
Hmm.
so when it closes, it just stops the backward flow, right?
Yes. Because when the ventricles are pumping with the higher power compared to the atria, there is a strong chance that the blood would go back. But we should relax the atria first so that the valves close. Now, when the ventricles contract, at the next stage, the ventricles should relax. And then the next stage starts. Then the next stage starts. So if you try to convert it into the proper terminology, the atrial contract would be called as atrial systole. The atrial relax would be called as the atrial diastole. Similarly, systole and diastole. So that is what we often called as cardiac cycle.
Okay.
Are you able to understand it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's all. Hold on. We can basically graph it through the, you can say, we can actually graph it in the um, hospitals, which is called as electrocardiogram, or what how we normally know it, ECG. You know about the ECG?
No.
Okay. All right. So we'll discuss it tomorrow
Okay.
and we'll finish it.